Hi, I'm Bradley by name. I want to quickly share with you my story. Perhaps you could glean from my ugly experience and probably prevent it in the future. It could also be of help to a family member or a friend. When I was in my 8th grade in high school, I had a friend called James. They had just lately moved into town, and his parents brought him to my school. Soon enough, we became friends. I do help him out in maths and other subjects he struggled with. We got along real well, and we're best of friends. During the break hours, we bought donuts and sodas and played football and lawn tennis together. We did compliment each other all the time. Whenever I have petty cash, we went shopping, and whenever he has those loose change too. We had a great day in school. We did handsomely well in our competitive school sports and made our respective houses proud of us. Also, when we represent our school in extramural programs, we oftentimes bring back various trophies, making our school very popular. We went on becoming close pals up to our 12th grade, and we graduated with distinctions. We had plans to attend the same college and possibly read the same course. Unfortunately, our plans and ambitions were truncated when my parents decided to relocate to another state before we gained admission to college. That was how I parted ways with James. Due to my good communication skills and the ability to draw reasonable and logical conclusions, coupled with my ability to absorb large quantities of information and dissolve them into something manageable and logical, I decided I was going to be a lawyer. Luckily, my dream came through. I did secure an admission to study law in college. Few years later, I graduated with distinctions in law and proceeded for a master's degree in law and legal studies. My dream was to set up my own law firm for arbitration and mediation. Soon enough, I was done with my 2nd degree and barged an LM. I set up my law firm to practice in Florida, and it did blossom. One day, I was driving around town when I sighted someone that looked like James somewhere around a car dealership. Quickly, I pulled over and stared at him through my rear mirror to ascertain if he was the one. I couldn't really figure out if he was the one from that distance, so I have to engage my reverse gear and hit the pedals. In less than 30 seconds, I was where he was standing. My goodness. I exclaimed. He was the one. I asked him what he was doing in a car dealership. With gladness and all the excitement in the world, he said he came to look for a befitting car he could use for his new role as a policy analyst, consulting for a government agency in the state. Apparently, James had graduated from college as a political scientist. I was super excited to learn that my friend had also made it. Immediately, I joined in helping him get a good car that day. Soon enough, we got to know each other's place. James lived in a more bigger and gorgeous apartment than mine. I was modest and chose to keep it simple. Time and again, we flexed around town and had some fun. I soon had a girlfriend named Beverly. We met at a hangout during a Christmas holiday. They'd come over to Florida to spend the holidays. We had a distant relationship for a while until she got a job with a telecommunication company and moved over to Florida. Not too long from when she moved in, we decided there was no need for further delay. We planned to tie the knot within the 2nd quarter of that year. Preparations were ongoing, and James was at hand to help out in the organization and planning. Soon, it was the D-Day, and we had a blissful and euphoric wedding that was lavished by a timeless and breathtaking joy, creating a sense of depth and richness. James was my best man, and he did absolutely well. I moved into my home with Beverly after our honeymoon. We did had a great marriage. James had frequented our home after we returned back just to help out in any way he could, making sure we were fine. I'd been really impressed by his kind gesture, and Beverly also made some good remarks about him. Soon enough, she got to know him even better as our house became his 2nd home. We related, played, and cracked jokes, and had everything going so well. Not too long, I secured a mediation and arbitration service with a client in Thailand that will last for almost a year. I had to be away from home most of the time in the course of rendering this service. It was a huge one, and the proceed that will eventually accrue from it stands the chance of buying us our dream home and car at the same time. I explained everything to Beverly, and she was excited about it. Of course, I had to intimate James about it, and he went agog to celebrate the jackpot. When it was time for me to embark on my first trip, I told James to help keep an eye on Beverly and to also keep her company. I left for the trip and returned after 3 weeks. Beverly received me warmly and was super excited to have me back. She took out time to tell me how dearly she missed me and also commended James for keeping her company. She tried to inquire if it were possible to transfer the case over to Florida. But I let her know it's not just possible. It's a mediation case that involves close to 10 different aggrieved parties who are based in Thailand. I felt bad that I could do nothing about it. James came around to greet us, and he also made the same remarks. I explained that it simply wouldn't work. I stayed with Beverly for another 2 weeks and have to leave for Thailand again. This time, I was to spend a longer time, approximately a month. I assured Beverly that my ventures to Thailand was worth it. I reminded her of that house we dreamed about and the Porsche she had always wanted to drive. This is the price we have to pay at the moment, I told her. I continued. And in the next 10 to 11 months, it's going to be history. She got excited and gave me leave. I jumped on the plane and off. I was on my way to Thailand. I really had a tough time mediating between 10 different parties, and in most cases, I had to hire a translator and an interpreter. Soon enough, I was back to Florida. As I approached the house, I'd expected Beverly to be super excited when she saw me. She rather received me with cold feet and never bothered to tell me how she missed me. I asked to find out if she was okay. She said she was a little bit down with fever after being lonely for almost the entire time I was in Thailand. I was baffled by that. I told her that whilst I was away, I have been keeping tabs with James and he told me he has been coming around to see you. Quickly, I called James to find out what happened. He assured me he'd been coming around and did everything possible to keep her company. James said he's been coming around to see you. Why are you saying he didn't? I asked her. She chuckled and waved the matter off by asking me about the trip. I told her my experiences and challenges over there in Thailand. And surprisingly, she encouraged me to take heart and be the man that I was. Then, she asked to know when next I'll be returning back, and I said next week. That's great, she exclaimed. We invited James over, had a mini dinner night, and drove around town. James assured me that everything was okay, and he'd try his best to see that Beverly was fine. I returned back the following week, and while I was there, a neighbor of mine called. She was an elderly woman in her late 50s that lived with her 3 daughters in an apartment adjacent to ours. "Where have you been, Bradley?" she asked with an excited voice. I told her I've been engaged in a mediation and arbitration service that had to make me take a trip to Thailand, and it will last for the next 9 months. She then asked me a very important question that got me thinking. "Are you still interested in your marriage?" "Yes, of course," I replied. "Is anything the matter?" I asked. "Yes, of course," she replied. She went on. "For almost a month now, a gentleman has frequented your home, even at odd hours, and I've seen him go out with your wife. For a moment, I thought that would surely be James, and I was sure he never meant any harm. He was just trying to keep Beverly company." Quickly, I asked if she could possibly describe the man she was talking about. "He is tall and muscular with a thick brown mustache." "That's James, my best of friends," I quickly replied. I went on. "He's just trying to keep my wife company in my long absence," I added. "What do you mean keeping your wife company?" she sharply questioned. She continued. "Does going out at evening and returning back late towards the morning hours constitute keeping a company? Are they some robots of some sorts that have no feelings or emotions?" For a moment, it hit me that I have made a grave mistake. I've unnecessarily pushed my wife to a tight corner that might eventually take advantage of her emotions and make her vulnerable. I also thought of James in the same light. "Get down quickly and fix this mess before it gets even more messier," she ordered. I'd spent only 2 days since my arrival and many thoughts were racing through my mind. It dawned on me that my arrangements for Beverly's comfort just wasn't right. But I trusted James. He had been my teenage hood friend and had never betrayed me before. I thought for a moment. I am also sure of Beverly and doubt if both of them will ever betray my trust. Quickly, I found a way of waving those thoughts away to concentrate on the job at hand. Though I was a bit more cautious ever since my neighbor called. I made sure I keep in touch with Beverly almost every day. Somehow, I pondered over what my neighbor told me, and at once, I decided to return to Florida before my slated date. I thought it'll be foolish and useless if I got all the money, acquire the house and buy the Porsche, and then lose Beverly, for whom I worked so hard to impress in the place. I was on my way back to Florida to fix the mess, like my good neighbor had advised me. Upon touching down in the airport, I was poised to quickly see James before going home. It was an early morning arrival, about some few minutes past 5. Quickly, I took a cab to his home. As we approached his house, I sighted my car parked right next to his. Immediately, I knew something was fishy. Quickly, I asked the cabman to pull over, and he did. I put a call through to him, letting him know that I've just arrived town and will like to quickly see him before I head home to see Beverly. He told me he have not been around since yesterday. He claimed to be out of town, but will be returning towards the evening. How about Beverly? I asked. He said he left her yesterday afternoon before embarking on his journey. His voice was really shaking, and I could sense something fishy. I could not as much as hung up the phone when his door opened. There he was with Beverly, urging her to hurry up and get back home before I arrive. Still wearing one of the scanty bikini nightgown I bought for her. She hastily made her way to the car to drive away, while he continued making frantic efforts to make her hasten up. Immediately, I alighted from the cab and approached them. When he saw me, he nearly passed out. It was as though he was sighting a ghost. Beverly quickly turned off the ignition and sat still like a sculpture. Within a few minutes, she perspired so profusely that it was obvious she'd been traumatized by my sudden appearance. They really could not believe their eyes. We just stared at each other without saying a word for over 5 minutes. Finally, James spoke up. Sorry, Brad. I never meant any harm. Beverly complained she was lonely and tired of sleeping alone in the house. She decided to spend the night in my place, and I thought on how to say no to her request, but couldn't muster up the courage to do that. I had to let her in. Then he went ahead to lie, claiming it was the first time she ever passed the night in his place and that nothing happened. All the while he talked, Beverly stayed mute and stared into the steering wheel that was just in front of her. I could notice her dissenting voice. Through her body language, and not too long, it was clear that James was only lying to me. Enough of your explanations, I exclaimed. For the first time, I lost confidence in you when I called, and you claimed to be out of town. So, there's no amount of talk you could do now to convince me. When I said that, he was taken aback and was so ashamed of himself. He suddenly kept quiet and watched what I'll do next. Turning to Beverly, I asked, "What in the world are you doing in James's apartment, with a scanty bikini nightgown that was meant for only 2 of us?" Quickly, she covered her face with both of her palms and began to sobbing. I continued, "Yes, of course. I asked James to keep you company so you wouldn't be too lonely. And I did that based on trust and going by our antecedent. I never asked you guys to begin an affair, but it's obvious you both have jumped the gun. Perhaps I should have done it some other way, but it's still not a yardstick for you to cheat on me. I am disappointed in both of you." Turning to James, I angrily exhaled, "I will never have done such to you, James." Suddenly, I started shedding tears as I spoke. I went on, "James, I'd trusted you all my life and never thought you could ever betray me. You have the guts and effrontery to sleep around with my wife because I begged you as a friend to help keep an eye on her while I was away. You are worse than a traitor, and you deserve to be treated in the most dehumanizing and harrowing manner. You simply have made me never to trust anyone going further." "I'm sorry, Brad, but I think we can talk this out," James whispered softly. "What else do you want us to talk about?" I asked in disappointment. "I can't trust you anymore, and I'll make sure you pay dearly for this." Turning back to Beverly, I said, What's the use of having you as a wife when I can't trust your loyalty? I've heard of many women who kept themselves chaste for even more than 2 years in their husband's absence, when they went to study or something as urgent as war in some country. In most cases, they never got to visit home until they were done. I have been coming home to you on several occasions. This is just 6 months into the contract, and look what you've done. When I said that, she busted into tears and cried aloud. She begged me to forgive her and said she wants to make some confessions. Suddenly, James became uncomfortable and really disturbed when she said that. She went on, "James is not a true friend. If you thought he'd been your friend all this while, I want you to quickly erase those thoughts from your mind and brace up for what you're about to hear. I am culpable, but I still have a little bit of conscience. That's why I had to confess. When you made your second trip, James came around and kept me company as agreed. But few days later, he started acting funny. First, he started attempting to hug me and hold me tight to his body when he comes around. I resisted that for a while. But one day, he forced himself on me and attempted raping me. We fought so hard, but he eventually overpowered me, and we had sex that day. He threatened that if I ever let you know about it, he'll turn the matter against me. He reminded me that I don't even have any evidence I could use to prove my assertions. He apologized to me that night and begged me to just comply with him and stop being apprehensive. I thought, what's the need? He'd had me already. What else am I protecting? He became so nice and gentle and will always apologize for his misdemeanor. Soon enough, I found him interesting and we began to sleep together. This is not the first time I slept over in his place. More worst than everything I've said so far, he suggested that I divorce you so we could relocate to some distant land and start our lives all over again. He'd said that over and over again, and I keep telling him I'll think about it. Turning to him, I said, "Is that so, James?" He turned around, walked into his house and shut the doors. I stood there speechless, staring at Beverly. "Please forgive my complicity, Brad," she spoke up. "I can't even imagine living my life without you. It's not entirely my fault. I was overpowered and overwhelmed, and I simply just couldn't help matters," she added. "Why did you wait until I have to bust you guys up? That is to say, you couldn't have opened up had I not found out for myself. You kept cheating on me for the past 6 months until I found out, and then you claim I'm the only one you want to spend the rest of your life with. What do you take me for? Some clown or a fool? It's over, Beverly. We can't live under the same roof anymore," I angrily spoke up. "I'll be mild on you for confessing and exposing the ill intentions of James. But damn it, you could be my wife anymore," I said. She got out of the car and started rolling on the bare ground in an attempt to make me change my mind. "But I told her to stop that gimmick," I went on. "My only grouse with you is your silence up until this moment. If you had told me what James did to you, I wouldn't have considered divorcing you." Suddenly, I got a little bit emotional and had to leave her with the car. Meanwhile, members of the neighborhood were beginning to stare at us because it was day already. On reaching home, I called her uncle and let him in on all that had transpired. He was sad. I then let him know I was filing for divorce. I got a learned colleague of mine who prepared the documents and I signed. Beverly managed to sign the documents after begging for several days. As she signed the documents, she spoke and cursed James, weeping bitterly. I was really touched by the way she wept, and I knew James will soon be in trouble. She eventually relocated and returned back to her parents in New Jersey. Later on, I heard she got married to one of her college friends who works with a security outfit. I calmed down for a while to reflect on the possible ways I could punish James. I thought of writing to his office, but reasoned that punishment wouldn't be sufficient enough. Meanwhile, he never called me to apologize or reconcile. While I thought on these, news reached me that he was involved in a ghastly automobile accident and lost both of his legs. He finally ended up on a wheelchair. Eventually, he couldn't cope with his work. He had to go on a compulsory retirement. As the year drew to a close, I wrap up the deal in Thailand and bought a dream home and used the remaining balance to marry another wife. We now live happily and have two gorgeous children, Annie and Jonathan.